Thanks for tuning into the Sinner to Saint podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share with your friends and family so more people can join the conversation. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Sinner to Saint podcast, episode 2. I'm here with my very first guest, Miss Trinity Swearington, actress extraordinaire out in Las Vegas, Nevada. Trinity, please tell our audience about yourself and some projects that they can catch you in.
My name is Trinity Swearington. I've been acting for about 4 years now. You can catch me on BET Plus on a feature called Ruined, starring Carrie Hilson.
You guys got to check it out because it is definitely unhinged. Her character is on one from start to finish. So check her out. She does a wonderful job, very committed to the role, and a very wild ending for her, to say the least. So where are you from and what got you into acting?
I am from Gwinnett County in Georgia, and it's a little south of Atlanta. And I actually fell in love with acting through a drama class at my community college. And it was something where I just wanted a 9 p.m. class so I can have a reason to be out late. And it actually grew into something that I continued on when I moved to Las Vegas. And I absolutely love the craft and storytelling. It's a passion of mine that I didn't know I had.
Yeah, that's really, really awesome to hear. So the first chapter of my book, which is what we're going to be talking about today, is about finding your purpose. And I'm actually curious to hear about your thoughts on the acting world, because when it comes to that type of career path, it's 1,000,000 to 1 shot to make it happen. So what actually made you feel like acting was your calling and what you were supposed to do with your life?
I've heard someone describe acting and actors as having the need to express and having the innate, it's almost a natural instinct. You feel it in your gut where you learn something or someone tells you something and you come through a new download, a new set of knowledge, and you just have no other way, to get it out other than being able to attack the scripts and being able to go into storytelling. When it came to what I fell in love about it, it's always been me learning something, me going through life, and then having just this innate need to get it all out, and not only get it all out, but to connect with other people through this shared feeling, this shared heartstring that we have, where everything else can be different, but this is the one way where we can connect, and this is the one way where we can grow together and change together. And it was that feeling almost every Sunday, every class, every time that you got to attack this with a scene partner, where you felt a little bit closer to humanity. And that's why people say that actors are the most broken, or because we're all trying to connect, because there's something that we're all missing.
That last thing you said about being the most broken. I am an actor myself, but one of the things that I've learned through studying the craft is I think it's less about an actor being broken and more about an actor having to accept their brokenness in order to really delve into their craft. You have to be able to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is one of the hugest things an actor has to overcome. They have to deal with their pain. They don't get to brush it away and put it beneath the surface. You have to accept your frailties. And I think that's really admirable for anybody who tries to pursue that career field, because you really have to look in the mirror and you might not like what you see. So I really wanted to touch on that real quick. I thought that was a very interesting thing that you said, and it made me think about that. But going into the whole subject that we're talking about right now when it comes to purpose, it really kind of sounds like you found and think that your purpose is to be a vessel that stories are told through, so people can feel connected to you through your storytelling, so they don't feel alone in their situation. So they're not the only one that are actually going through something, and they can actually see somebody on the screen and be like, wow, she's going through the same thing I'm going through. I can relate to that. I don't feel so alone. And it can help uplift them, and it can help them get the help that they feel like they need, because this is a shared experience. So I'm glad to hear that you feel like you found your purpose through that. You read the first chapter of the book. I wanted to get your immediate thoughts, feelings about it, and things that you resonated with.
So what I resonated the most with is a story that I wouldn't have known unless you told me, about Jonah. and about how he just continuously doesn't walk this certain plan. There's no successful person who went through just having a plan. They had a point where they had to pivot, and either they did or didn't. And that's what set them on for the rest of their life. So the story of Jonah stuck out to me. And then just the being able to connect this into people like Kobe, and just being able to connect this to real life people, it makes it feel a little less alone.
One of the things I wanted to make sure to get across in this book is that there is nothing new under the sun. A lot of times when we talk about church, we don't connect it to the present. We talk about it in regards to, hey, this thing happened yesteryear. This is the book that I'm supposed to follow, but there's a disconnect between then and now. I wanted this book to be a bridge so we can have conversations like this and be like, oh yeah, I can see how even though Kobe was a basketball player and that's what he did for a living, his purpose was the impact and the legacy that he left behind and the Mamba mentality that he instilled in a lot of young people.
Yeah.
That's what his purpose was. And the thing is that we can pursue something, like you could pursue acting, but your purpose may not be to be an actress. It might be a summit or a seminar that you hold as an actress that connects with an individual and brings an individual out of a situation through your storytelling. So that's really good. You really connected with that. And Jonah is a great story because it shows us the frailties of human beings. It shows us that we have desires and wants that don't align with God's will, and God has to put us in the right direction. And that's why I put that in the section about finding your purpose, because we have to see past our personal desires and see into what he wants us to do. Going from that, I kind of want to segue into some of the roadblocks that we have to actually seeing our purpose fully. One of the things I write about extensively in the book is social media,
Yes.
and how social media is a tool for good, but it also causes a lot of negative feelings and makes people desire things that may not be the will of God, but because they see somebody else being successful doing it, now they're like, I can do it. So what are your thoughts on that and how social media impacts us being able to see the forest through the trees?
I think it all goes down to values and how strong your value system is. That can be how you value yourself, how you value other people's opinions. That's something that can be set in very early or very late. I feel like the most impressionable people are the ones with the weakest value systems. And then it creates this gold standard of who people are when it comes to this thing that really doesn't exist. And it's really interesting to see, but also you have people our age that are saying, get off of social media. It is highly addictive. It's not going to help you. Like the message is getting out there. I think it's just how do we explain it to a generation that is literally given an iPad as the parents are trying to go do something. And it's like it's ingrained in us. And it becomes a part of our value system. So as far as social media goes, I feel like it can be used for good. But also I feel like it needs a different place within our value system.
One of the things that I want to get across with this podcast is the ability for people to be vulnerable and honest about the things that they've experienced. And as an actress, seeing other actors that you know doing things that you wish you were doing. Can you go into some personal experiences that you've had with social media and how they've affected you mentally?
Like a solid, okay, sorry. I went through a solid month of being a hater. um, of looking left and right, or seeing having a string of really cool auditions that I thought I was gonna get, and then having a string of seeing those auditions on on
Yeah.
TV and on the networks and being like, who was that?
It
It's
should
a
have been
lot
you,
of
right?
really, right, like a lot of should have been me-isms. And it's that same result, but having a different response to it. And it's also being on social media, seeing people that look just like me, or I fit a prototype, and seeing that prototype and feeling like, oh, I could have done that. Why didn't I? Why didn't they pick me? It starts a weird slope of thinking where it becomes from haterism of everyone else, and then it becomes to myself, and it's directly from social media, directly from the ways that society really uplifts one community just to degrade another. And it's very flip-floppy, and you realize that everyone has an opinion, but everyone, you value certain opinions more than you value the others. You'll take the negatives without hearing the thousands of positives.
Mhm.
And that's something that we do in life, is we'll take all of the negatives that happen throughout the day, and then we'll ingrain that in us, and then we'll ignore all the positives. We'll ignore the, one really good role that we had, where someone really said, hey, it's not a matter of if but when. You got this, you can go for it. You missed that moment, and you take the auditions that you didn't get, and the roles
Mhm.
that you didn't get, and the callbacks that you didn't get. It's really important to not look left and right, and to take those moments where you did get confirmation, where God really did send a sign that you were on the right path. A lot of times we forget that those signs are even there, because we're listening to those very human like tendencies in your head. So that's where I had to flip a switch in my head and listen to those moments where I was told that I was on the right path, and I just had to keep going, and not listening to all the negatives throughout a day, and all the no's that I would get, and all the, yeses for other people. And I had to actually be happy for someone else rather than unhappy and for me.
Mhm. Oh, I really like what you said there, especially when it comes to like self-worth. Because I actually do, in another one of my chapters, I do actually talk about exactly what you said, where you can have 99 people tell you you're the most beautiful, wonderful, talented person in the world. But if somebody says that you suck, that is what you hold on to. That is what you tell 20, 50, 300 people. You start internalizing that negativity. And I think, honestly, that's one of the dangers of social media and
Yeah.
putting yourself out there. I'll be honest with myself. I had a lot of anxiety doing all of the stuff that we're doing right now because I know myself. I know that I get very heated when people say something that is negative to me. I internalize it. It bothers me, and I think that it's something wrong with me or something that I need to change when it's really one person's opinion. Just like all the other people who said, "Great job. I like what you're doing. I want to be a part of the process." Those people don't speak as loud to me as the one person who's like, "Who are you to do this? Who gave you a voice and who gave you a platform to talk about the things that you're talking about?" Those type of thoughts and those type of comments is what permeates in the back of my head, not the good stuff. And I feel like we need to have more conversation. I feel like we need to talk about clinging on to the positivity, because the only thing I feel like you should get from negativity is potentially feedback. Because even if they're saying something negative, there might be something in there that's like, oh, let me look at that. Let me check that
Yeah.
out.
There's always a
So,
little bit of truth in it.
but the thing is that you can internalize it.
Yeah.
And I feel like as I get older, approaching my 30s, I've learned to care less. I've
Yeah.
learned to not allow these things to bother me and affect me, because at the end of the day, as a Christian man, the mission's always the most important thing. I'm also in the military, and we always have to make the main thing the main thing. It's never anything personal. It's always about uplifting God and uplifting his kingdom through our works. So I've had to learn in the workplace to put those things aside, to put those, how are people going to feel about me if I say this?
Yeah.
Are they going to like me? You got to put that stuff away anyway, because when you really think about it, when you go to work, how many people do you actually talk to? How many people, if you were to quit today, are going to hit you up and say, hey, you want to go out for drinks later? Not a lot. But we put so much value in their thoughts and perceptions of us that sometimes it paralyzes us and freezes us from pushing forward with the things that we're trying to do. And that's what I feel like we need to start getting away from. You can't allow perception and the things that people say affect your mission, affect the things you're trying to achieve, because anything that is negative, I believe, can be turned to fuel to motivate. But I feel like a lot of times we use it as something to doubt ourselves, to say, no, I can't do this. The voices that we give power are the ones that we are going to allow to influence how we deal with our daily lives. And I appreciate you being honest and being upfront about seeing those people get those jobs and
Yeah.
how it made you feel, because that's real stuff. That is real stuff that we all go through. And I'm definitely a person that used to look at like counts, look at comments, look at all that stuff. At the end of the day, none of that matters. It really doesn't. But we make it everything. And that's why I used to not be a fan of social media detoxes. But the farther we go into this social media era, the more I'm like, yeah, sometimes you just got to put the phone down. Sometimes you just got to disable the app for a little bit so you can have your mental sanity and experience life. Because anybody who's ever gone through one of those social media detoxes that I've talked to, they've always said that they were able to be more present. They were able to focus on the moment and really focus on achieving the things and the goals that they set out for themselves. Because I'm guilty. First thing I do when I wake up is pick up that phone, check my apps, scroll through Instagram, scroll through Facebook to see what people are talking about. And I blink and an hour and a half has gone by.
One thing that I've realized that I do is when I'm in a moment of comparison,
Mm,
I'm in a moment of being stagnant. It contributes to that hour and that hour and a half where you're thinking of now you're thinking of everything that you haven't done
yep.
instead of focusing on the things that you can control that you even plan to do throughout the day. Now you kind of have a tally system set up on what you've seen everybody else do and the things that you plan to do, and then it creates an anxiety ridden wall
Mm,
of action. And I feel like when you finally take those other tallies out and you can just focus on your own scores, then it becomes an actionable plan. And that it now it is actually a to-do list that you can do rather than a list of comparison and a list of X's and O's for you and someone else.
yep.
It's something that you completely have to drown out. And it's a tool that you have to sharpen. And sometimes when you get back onto that little tally system and you get back on there, it's something that builds up in your head. And you really think that you're good
Yep.
at the beginning of the thing. And then you realize after a couple of months that it's a slippery slope back into it. No, I don't
Yep.
really think anyone can really go a good amount of time without losing themselves on this thing that we've made so important when it comes to comparisons.
Yep.
I don't know. That just, it was very interesting to me when you said that.
Yeah, because you know what they say, comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
and
you want to enter back into society and enter back into the thing that people talk about. You want to know what's going on in the shade room. You want to, that's how some people get their news.
yep. And kind of backtracking a little bit, one of the things I feel like we need to start changing our mind towards is being happy for those who are achieving things instead of looking at it as how did they get that? Why don't I have that? Just be happy that they were blessed with that opportunity
It's a
because
mindset switch.
it is. It is. I just kind of came up with that as you were talking, where we look at everything in life from the lens of how does it affect me? That's how we look at things. We don't look at things like, you know what, I'm really happy that they actually made that happen. And that's what I feel like we need to start doing instead of being like, oh my gosh, Sandra got a new car. I'm still riding this busted thing with a dent in the back. That's not how we should start looking at this. Honest, or take it as motivation. It's like, oh my gosh, she's been working with me for 3 months and she was able to afford that car. Maybe I can do it. What am I doing with my finances? Using it as a tool of elevation and motivation instead of using it as a tool to actually think negatively about yourself and where you are in life. Because we've all been there and we've had conversations in the past about looking left and right, looking at others. I do that now. I'm almost 30, no kids. And, you know, you see people that I went to high school with getting married, having kids, all of that type of stuff. And you start getting FOMO, fear of missing out. And that's also one of those things where comparison can be stealing a lot of things. Because if I'm looking at my friend or my best friend who's getting married and I'm thinking I'm going to get married, now I'm more inclined to rush the process instead of actually trusting God's timing and taking myself out the equation and trusting that he's going to put whoever I'm supposed to be with in front of me and it's going to work out when he wants it to work out. And that's probably the hardest part about purpose, going back to the theme of this chapter, is being patient, being willing to actually listen to God and where he's tugging you and where he's guiding you. Because we've talked about this whole time, is that we get lost in our wants, we get lost in our desires. And like the story of Jonah, our desires may not align with what God wants for us. And we have to take the time to pray, meditate, or whatever it is that you do to actually ask, show me where you want me to go. If this is for me, give me a sign. I remember the first time that I ever acted, I was a lead in a musical. First scene that we did was a solo in front of everybody. And I'm not a singer. I'm not. I actually just practiced really, really hard to not be terrible at it. And I remember being in the back in the green room before I went on and saying, God, look, if this is what you want me to pursue, please don't let me fall on my face. If I fall on my face, I'm going to probably take that as a sign. I should probably do something else. But I didn't. And even though acting may not be the main thing for me in the future, I'm open to that possibility. Pursuing it from that moment on has led to me being exactly where God needed me to be in every step of my life. And I wanted to bring that up because just because you're setting out to do something and you don't necessarily achieve what you want to achieve out of it, it doesn't mean it was wasted effort. It might have been a tool that puts you in the position to eventually do the thing you need to do.
Or it might have been the tool to get the resources.
Yep.
To get the people, to find your tribe. Sometimes it's not about what you did, but it's about the people that you met. So then when you finally find your way, you already got a team behind you that knows what you're capable of, what your potential is, what you've done, and they have other things to bring to the table. There's a lot of ways where we feel like we've pursued this dream that's very far-fetched, that nearly there's a 1% of people that really make it, and we're very crazy for pursuing it. But it's not just the acting. There's so many jobs within that realm that is just a door.
Yep.
And I feel like in seeing you and seeing the pivot points that you felt like you've had to make, it was just a stepping stone for you. And it's opened up so many doors. But I feel like what you had to learn about humans and about yourself was something that was fast tracked with the amount of storytelling that you've had to do on a set or through being a coach or meeting so many people. It's about the people that you've met.
100%.
So yeah, I think that's a beautiful thing to see as far as what you're doing now. 'Cause I really don't think that this book would have been able to come to light if you didn't have this conversation with so many people that have needed it.
No, you're 1,000% right on that. And to tell you a little bit more about myself, acting is actually what birthed this whole book idea at the end of the day. Because I talked a little bit about it in the first episode, but between 11th grade to the end of college, I was kind of just figuring my way, just like everybody else. Who am I? Who do I want to be? All of that type of stuff. It wasn't until I graduated that I wanted to reignite my faith. And the way that I actually did it was through acting, because I was in LA at the time. I was that actor that was like, I'm going to LA for a month. I'm going to get famous. I'm going to meet an agent and everything's going to go great. Obviously, it didn't work out that way. But through taking these classes, because that was the first time I actually took acting classes, the first class that I took really harped on understanding story and not what we perceive, because they talked about Romeo and Juliet and how the story of Romeo and Juliet is looked at as a love story, but really it was about two teenagers that had the hots for each other. Like that whole thing, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? She's feeling some things, some woman things going on the inside at that part. And I was shook when I heard that. I was like, what? I thought that was like the most romantic because that's what people play it as. But no, she's really just being like, no, Romeo, where are you at? I need you to come do the deed. That's really what she's saying in those moments. And it just so happened that I wanted to reignite my faith and was going through this situation at the same time. And I was motivated to read the entire Bible. But when I read it, because I had taken that class, I actually looked at it for the story that it told. I grew up in the church. We like to talk about the Bible and the stories in the Bible as, what are the lessons? What can I get out of it? I actually wanted to understand the story. And when I understood the story, I started to make connections between what happened then and what happened now. And this was about 6 years ago. And all the experiences from then on confirmed and showed me a lot of things about life and how they mirror up with modern day time and the Bible. And all the steps lead to Rome. I believe that. I believe that any path that you take is going to lead you to whatever God's purpose is for you. You just have to submit yourself to the process and do the best where you're at while you're there. Because that's the only reason I was able to be where I am today and evolve as a person from who I was when I graduated to who I was when I, went through my spiritual revelation to who I am today. All of those experiences added up resulted in a product that I personally feel, and I'm still growing, but I personally feel is the most pleasing to God and what he wants and what he has called me to do. But if I didn't go through the ups and downs, if I didn't go through, hey, I'm going to be the best actor in the world, I'm going to work hard and, show up to every class, and, I'm in the beginner class this week, next week I'll be in an intermediate, and then the week after that I'll be an expert. If God didn't make me that way, I wouldn't have had the fervor, I wouldn't have had the fire to read the book the way that I did.
Yeah.
But because it's a long book. The Bible is a long book. It is a really long. I read that thing from cover to cover. That
takes motivation.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a level of urgency.
Yeah, but that's why everything matters, because I've always been that type of person that when I'm motivated to do something, it's getting done. And I don't like doing half measures of anything that I do in life. And so the way that God created me naturally propelled me to do the things that I feel like he wanted me to do, especially when it, resulted in me writing this book and eventually making this podcast, just to have these type of conversations, because it's been very fruitful to hear the things that you're saying and very affirming that I'm not the only one going through a lot of this stuff, because I've been there too. I watched audition for The Watcher on Netflix. I think you actually helped me out with that audition. And I watched it. I saw that. I was like, it wasn't great, but I was sitting there, I was like, I should have been that guy. That should have been me. He took my part.
With you helping you with that audition, I was like, oh,
yeah, yeah, because I remember that because I had gotten coached on it, and you know how it is when you get coached, you kind of get locked into how the coach told you to perform it, and you kind of lose yourself sometimes and what makes you in the performance, because you're trying to hit notes that somebody else told you. And you think because you hit these notes that somebody told you, oh, that's going to be the best performance, even though really it's just a guide. Back in my training at that time, I think that was like 3-4 years ago when I had that, I wasn't at that place where, I could understand that and make that delineation. I was like, nope, he told me to do this. This is what I'm going to do. And like you were sitting there like, oh, Mike, I know what you can bring to this.
Yeah, but you were like, no, he said that or the writer usually does this, and there was something that he told you to do specifically.
Yep.
That was completely just a little left from what you would have naturally brought to the camera.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So I remember that too. But hindsight is something, it makes you develop either a low or a lesson from whatever you've gone through.
Yeah.
So it's just being able to look in hindsight. It's actually very funny to watch that show. And I'm like, ugh.
Mm-hmm. And this is a good segue into how God actually does things to the benefit of you, regardless of what you want. Because this was a Ryan Murphy project. It's on Netflix right now. But when I got the original script, I don't know what it turned out to be, but basically this character was creeping on a minor. And that's
would have wanted to do that anyway.
I wouldn't have even wanted to do that, because even though it's acting, knowing that when people watch it, this is how they see me, as this person who's like 20, 24 or whatever, trying to hook up with a 16-year-old. That's not how I want to be perceived. That's not how I even want to be introduced to the world of acting, because it's outside of my morals and my left and right boundaries that I have set for me in regards to which characters that I will and will not take. So, I say that to say anybody that's watching, just because a door closes doesn't mean that that's a door that should have been opened. Sometimes God slams doors in your faces because you're going to be tempted to do something that is outside of what he wants you to do. Because I guarantee Ryan Murphy, American Horror Story, it's like, wow, this could be my big break. And if I had gotten that opportunity and they said, hey, Mike, I want you to do this role, I would have contemplated things and probably compromised my values to do this part because it could facilitate my career.
There's something that my acting coach actually said to me. Well, not even to me, like I'm special. The entire class. um,
Specifically to you. You were the
just
one that she was talking. She was looking at your little square on Zoom, and she was like, Trinity, this message is for you.
this is just for you. I know you're doing a podcast. But she said that Diana Castle, she's amazing, and she bases everything in human empathy, and everyone is going through a certain level of chaos in their life, no matter what.
Mm.
We can look at each little of our boxes, and we have 18 people in class, and you're going to come across 18 different stories, and we're all going to not be able to imagine the other person's. But they're all real, and everyone has a certain level of chaos going on. And when you have chaos going on, it all goes down to what are your values? Because if you strip away everything from a person, all you have are your values.
Yep.
And if you don't have a strong value system, then you're going to be very lost in that chaos. There's not going to be an eye of the storm because you're not going to know how do you make those decisions. That's the definition of lost. I feel like if you go into something that creates a monster out of impressionable people, you're going to be very lost in the type of stuff that you take, and you're not going to like who comes out at the end.
Yep.
And when it comes to someone who I wasn't that like, I go to church.
Yep.
I actually I do believe, but when it comes to other people who wouldn't have such a strong value system, what do you think that they should hold on to when it comes to this level of chaos in this very impressionable industry? How do you discern what path to move forward to when you don't really know what you believe in?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And before I dive into that, I wanted to kind of put a bow on what you just said, because you said a lot of good stuff just now. If you don't stand for something, you will fall for anything. So one of the things that I've noticed when it comes to faith and belief is that people tend to connect their faith and belief to an individual or circumstance. Your belief is your belief. It doesn't matter what your daddy does. It doesn't matter what your best friend does. It doesn't matter what your boyfriend, girlfriend does, or whatever. Your faith and belief is yours alone. And what I would tell people to do is to take ownership. Because regardless of what your friends do, 'cause peer pressure is a thing. Everybody wants to go along with the crowd. Nobody wants to be different. If somebody's saying a bunch of different things, you might go along with it solely because you're not the odd person out. I get that. But at the end of the day, you have to have something to hold on to. You have to allow your value system to be yours. It's just like a child, like a child that you love. Sorry for anybody that I might have offended with that, who don't have good relationship with their parents, but I'm talking about in a positive familial relationship. If you have a kid, you're not going to let anybody mess that up. You don't want anybody watching your kid. You don't want anybody doing anything with. That's how your faith should be. It should be something that you hold and cherish dearly and uniquely to you, because that's all it takes, because we're all going to mess up. We're all going to do things that we're not proud of. We're all going to make mistakes. But if that is your core, you will always find your way back to it. There's actually a verse in the Bible that talks about if you teach a child where they should go, they won't stray away from it. There's a parable about the prodigal son who goes off and tries to do things on his own, only to find out grass ain't greener. And then he came back home and his dad met him with open arms. And the dad was supposed to be representative of God and how he is going to accept us and bring us back in no matter how far we go. Because that period of time I told you between 11th grade and when I graduated, one of the things that I struggle with personally is feeling like I did so much wrong that I can't come back home, because I knew right from wrong. I grew up in the church. I have verses pushed into my skull that I can still recite to this day. And having that type of upbringing, when you eventually fall down, it's a lot more precipitous because you hold yourself to a higher esteem. I can't mess up. I know the word. I know what I'm supposed to do. And it's like you talked about earlier, it's a slippery slope. You just start going farther and farther down in negativity. Fortunately for me, I've always had a lot of core values, so I didn't get into anything like drugs or drinking or anything of that nature, because that was something that was core to me that I didn't want to have in my life. But everybody has their own battles. Everybody has their own thing that they have to overcome. And if you are a person that is struggling to be unique in that aspect, to be able to stand on your own 2 feet, to be able to stand on your values, just remember that the reward on the other end is going to be greater. It is. And you're going to learn more about yourself. You're going to learn more about who you are as a person through those type of situations. You're going to know what you're susceptible to. You're going to know what's going to tempt you more than other things. Don't look at sinning, messing up, and doing all that type of stuff as a thing that you can't recover from. Look at it as something you can learn from. Because you don't know what you can handle until you go through stuff. Until you go through adversity, you don't know what you're really made of. That's what they tell us in the military. They tell us leadership isn't made when things are going good. It's when stuff hits the fan. How do you handle those situations? That's what shows your mettle. That's what shows what your faith actually is in those moments that are actually challenging. And the thing is, I promise you, 90 to 95% of the people watching this or listening to this are going to fail. But it's not about the failure. It's about the bounce back. It's how you pick yourself back up and dust yourself off and get back on the horse.
Yeah.
You can't let setbacks hold you down.
One thing that, and it's just really funny just being able to take lessons from everything. One thing that I've learned to do is if I don't know the value system of a character that I'm trying to study, I'll write down traits of them. And then based on it, how, if she's a generous person, if she's a bit more selfish, if she's a bit more anxious, there's things that we do and ways that we speak and ways that our body language communicates that gives off that trait. So what I would say to someone who doesn't have so much of a strong core system or a strong belief system is there's who we are and then there's who we want to be. No one wants to be selfish. No one wants to be just for themselves, but they do want to be less selfless and a little more selfish. They want to say yes less, or they want to be more generous, or they want to be less procrastinating. There's certain ways that you can walk and certain ways that you can communicate with your body language in a personal relationships that you have that can build up to that trait, that can build up to that value. You can fake it till you make it. That cannot actually be a trait that you have, but you've written this down as someone that you would like to be. So you're holding yourself accountable to walking in that. Sometimes it just takes being able to see that word, having a conversation, having a conflict, and just acting on that. Not in a way that you want to, but in a way that it takes 20 seconds of a little bit of courage to say no to something you really want to say yes to, or to send that email to that job that you really don't want to work anymore, or to send, to have some type of communication that.
And it's never as heavy as we all make it out to be in our heads, because everybody gets that anxiety when they say no. You think about 40, 50 things that can go wrong, and all you're saying is no. And that's the crazy thing about it, is that you saying, I would like to pass on this, or I'm going to a new job, or I'm going to put in my 2 weeks notice or something like that. There's so much built up in your head over that time. But a lot of the times, once we actually do it, we're good. And that weight is off of our shoulder. And it's like, what was I stressed out about in the beginning? Why was I so stressed? And that's the funny thing.
Is being the type of person who's willing enough to have those conversations that you realize how okay it is and how you're not going to spontaneously combust. And it's just the feeling that, which is not really reality. So being able to turn into that person literally just by sharpening that skill. Some people are born with it. Some people are given those tools at a very young age, and some people aren't, and they have to learn it through adulthood. But it's never just who you are. If you don't have a core belief system, then that's just it. There's no room for progression. And I think that's just not true.
I agree with that. There's always room for growth. And the last thing that I wanted to touch on with what you just said, it was advice that I was given by my mentor when I first started out, because the first audition that I remember getting, was for a drug dealer that was getting busted. And
Yeah.
I didn't want to be a stereotype. And that was my first introduction to having to play a stereotypical role. And so I asked my mentor, how do you take roles like this that you feel internally is something that you shouldn't do, but it's also an opportunity and you don't have any moral thing wrong with it. It's just that it's not something you want to be seen as. And then he told me, and I held on to this like to this day, is that when he chooses roles, he chooses them based off whether or not God is working through the character or the story. Because one of the things that we have to realize is that, especially when it comes to TV and media and stuff like that, is that it has such a powerful influence. It can literally change perception and bring light to things that you didn't even know existed. How are you going to know that abuse in the household is a thing if you don't see somebody playing an abuser? It's an ugly role to play, but somebody has to do it to uncover some of the ugliness that we see in the world so we can be better moving forward. In that type of situation, if the whole point is to show that this is a negative thing, I can see the God in that. I can see a situation where I might even contemplate playing it because the good that's going to come on the other side of it is going to be greater than my personal feelings in this moment. And if you are having trouble selecting roles to play, just ask yourself, where's God shining through? Or going back to, finding your purpose. And did you have any questions about why I wrote a certain thing?
What was a moment where you found out you had to pivot and you really didn't want to?
When I went to college. So I've been very blessed. I'll start off with that. My family Bible verse is Proverbs 3:6, and it says, "In all your ways acknowledge God, and He will direct your paths." And I've held on to that since I was a child. And every step in my life that I've needed to take, it's been very clear that I need to take that step. But the one time that I was like, I don't want to do this, was when I was applying to college. I went to the Air Force Academy. I wanted nothing to do with the military because my dad served for 30 years and, he kept work out the home. And all I knew is that every 6 months or so, the military would yank my dad and he'd be gone for 6 months. So it didn't really leave a nice taste in my mouth of what life in the military is actually like. So I wanted nothing to do with it. But my mom made me apply because it was a free application and I had the grades for it. So I ended up applying. And I actually tried everything I could not to get into the school. We had a liaison assigned to us, and the liaison would tell me, "Hey, you're ready to apply for early action. You should, get your package ready and send it in early." I was like, "Okay, cool." I turned it in late. "Oh, you have a meeting, with a person from the school," and I was like, "Okay, cool. I'll show up late to show that I'm not really wanting to do this." But despite all of my efforts, and this is a really hard school to actually get into. They only let 1,000 people in every single year. Like,
Humble brag.
yeah, no, I'm just laying the ground floor.
No, I know.
Yeah,
It's
I'm just laying the ground floor. Like, this is not a place that has a high acceptance rate. And
Yeah.
so I did everything in my power not to get in. And I submit my application right before I go home, right before Thanksgiving, because my mom told me to. And it was after the early action deadline, which was in October. I submitted it in November. I go home. A week later, I get a call from this old white lady saying, "Guess what, Michael? You're in." I was like, "In what?" "You are officially an appointee for the United States Air Force Academy." I'm like, "What does that mean?" Does that mean I got in, or does that mean there's another level I have to go through? Because it didn't make sense. The timeline didn't. I didn't apply early. I did it after the deadline, so I wasn't supposed to find out till the next year. And to find out a week later that I got accepted into a school I didn't want to go to, I was like, there ain't no clear sign from God that this is where I'm supposed to go. And I remember when I got back to school, because I told my mom I didn't want to accept it right away, because I had a couple other full rides to places that I wanted to go to. And so I just remember staring at the accept deny button, staring at that for a week. just going crazy, just literally staring at it for hours because I didn't want to do it, but I felt like I had to. I felt like this is exactly where I need to be because of how things played out. That's why I was telling you that whole story, is because how everything shook out made the choice very clear, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. And I eventually did it, and it turned out to be the best decision of my life, because if I didn't go to the academy, I would have never met my mentor who came and visited the academy, who actually sparked my belief that I can be an actor. And then I wouldn't even be in Las Vegas. I wouldn't have met any of my friends. I wouldn't have met you, anybody. None of this would have happened. I don't even know where I would be if I had gone with where I wanted to be. So that being said, trust, lean on God when it comes to making the big decisions. Don't lean on the things that you want. Don't lean on the things that you feel like you should do. Trust that God is going to point you in the right direction, because so many good things came out of that one decision. Like, yes, I had to go through 4 years of being at a military school, but on the other side of it, I had a full job during COVID, making full paychecks. So I was very blessed and very fortunate that the government didn't shut down or anything like that. That alone was like, I made the right choice, because COVID was rough on a lot of people. And the reason why I bring that up is because I graduated in 2018. COVID hit in 2020. So 2 years had to happen before I saw a reason why God told me to go here. You may not see it in the present. You may not see it immediately. You may see it several years down the road, why God made you go through something or choose a certain path. But he's going to let you know eventually. Because like you were talking about earlier when you were asking the question about the situation that you meet, the people, the growing and all that stuff, none of that happens if I didn't make that one choice that was against everything that I wanted to do. And ultimately, that's what we are as people. We are the summation of the choices we make in life. And if you are a person that is going off the choices you want and not the choices that God wants, it's going to be a harder road. You're going to go through a lot more pitfalls. It's just like when parents say, you should have listened to me. That's how God is. God will let you do it. Like, that's what God did with Jonah. God let Jonah get on that boat. He let him go, and then the storm hit, and then he got eaten by a whale, and then he got taken to where he needed to go. But he let him go down that path, but he also course corrected. And that's why I'm telling you all that it's a can't lose game. It really is a can't lose game, because whatever you are meant to do, or whatever God's purpose is for you, it will happen no matter what path you choose to take.
I feel like for someone who is still struggling to find the truth and find the God in every situation, just replace that question, like, where, because I feel like in any form of conflict, you walk through a storm, you get eaten by a whale. You're not thinking about the positives, but you can think about the why. You can think about just asking the simple question of, why is this happening? Not why is this happening, but why is this happening? What do I need to change within myself to make sure that a conflict like this doesn't arise, or to make sure that instead of going right, I go left? When you're struggling with a belief system that just goes straight to God, and it's very important that you still go to the why, because you're still going to the same solution. Like, you're going to the same destination of, it's out of your control. And it's all not being orchestrated, but it's not in a form of not to help you. But when we see the world crashing and burning, it's really hard to find positives in that. So it's really imperative to try to find a why. Sometimes it's more difficult than other times. And it is a skill that we have to sharpen, but that need is still there. And then there goes formulating a belief system that really does make you surrender. But first you have to muscle your way through the surrendering, and not just, I can do that all by myself. I can fix this. I got this. I can be the carpenter of, no, there's already a carpenter somewhere. And he's trying to help you. But it really does take true surrender to not just this, but just the why. And then I feel like it'll lead you to that. Now, I do want to ask.
Before you ask your next thing, I actually wanted to tag something onto the end of that, because I like that. One of the things I teach my students, keep asking why, and then you'll uncover what a character is. But as far as life goes, I think we should also ask the question, how did we get here? Because One of the other things that I'm going to talk about in future podcasts that I write about in my book is that growth is a never-ending process. You are never a finished product. Never. There are very few facts of life. That's a fact. There's always growth to be had. There's always different eras of life. There's, oh, now I'm in college. Oh, now I'm in the real world. Oh, now I have a husband, a wife. Now I have kids. Now my kids are teenagers. Now my kids have kids. So many different versions of yourself that you will go through, and you're going to learn things every step of the way. So on top of asking why something's happening, also take the time to evaluate what choices you made that got you there and what you can learn from a situation to either A, not do it again, B, help other people who are going through the same situation get out of it, or C, just tell yourself, look, things happen in life. We'll chalk it up as a mistake, move on from it. I don't think people talk about that either. Sometimes you just do one thing. You do it one time, you learn what you need to learn in that moment, and never happens again. So that's one of those things where it's like, all right, cool. That's chalked up as a lesson learned, and we're moving on.
It's hard to say that, especially when people, the general public will feel like the world is happening to me. Like I can't help at anything that I go through. I can't help this person dying or this person wronging me or I losing my job. Like I can't help any of that. But what I do realize is that the people, not even the people, the times that I go through the most things, or I feel like I have the most tumultuous year ever, I also realized that it was the year that I found it the hardest to say no, or I found it the hardest to see the red flags or the writing on the wall when I needed to walk away and when it would have been less drama filled to walk away.
Because you're seeking something. Because you're going through something emotional and you're seeking a way out and you're finding it in places where you shouldn't be looking. Where if everything was normal and everything was good, you'd be like, nope. But sometimes we as human beings need affirmation. We need a lifeline to pull us out. And that's how we get sucked into doing things that we're not supposed to do because we're seeking our way out. And that's another thing that I write about. A lot of times when we're seeking our way out, we turn to negative things like alcoholism, abusing drugs, whereas Jesus actually teaches us that when we go through these things, seek God first.
Yeah.
You know, instead of trying to handle everything with your own strength on the first go around.
Being able to look in hindsight, I feel like he puts us into situations where we are meant to fail. We are meant to not be able to say no. We are meant to still go back into that comfort zone, even though we felt like we had years of progression underneath our belt, to make us realize that there's still not only work to be done, but you have to also find yourself. You have to have that chaos going on and still be able to find, you're figuring through the wins, or still be able to find your value system in a world that's just screaming everything that should be important to you. We are constantly met with situations where the world has happened to us and we still need to find ourselves within it. Sometimes we lose ourselves. Sometimes we act in ways that our parents would have. We act in ways that we would have a year ago, and we're a little ashamed that we went back to that person. But if you're able to look in hindsight, that in itself is a superpower. There's 40-year-olds, there's 50-year-olds that are not able to find themselves in terrible situations, so they just let the world happen. And they're faced with the same situation, but it's how you respond that's different. So I don't know, I feel like that was a beautiful concept.
That's a great thing that you said. And I'm going to say something that I don't think anybody's ever said before. And this is kind of a teaser into the next lesson that we're going to talk about is humility. Sometimes God will punch you in the face and knock you down a few pegs. Yeah, because people don't say this, but sometimes you can be arrogant in your faith. I feel like that's what turns a lot of people who are struggling off, is because once you reach a place spiritually, you have this kind of spiritual superiority where it's like, why can't you just figure it out? You just have to trust God, and like you're not trying to meet people where they're at. And that's what turns people off. Oh, these church people think they have it all together, and that's how she's talking to me, but I saw her in the club last week. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like, okay, you're acting all these type of ways, like you got your stuff together, but you're also doing things you're not supposed to do, but you're acting like you're spiritually superior to me instead of acting like my peer. Because no matter where you are spiritually, we are peers. There is no hierarchy. The Bible literally says we all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. That is a verse in the Bible. Nobody's perfect. It doesn't matter if you're a nun, it doesn't matter if you're a monk. We are peers. We are people at the end of the day. And sometimes God needs to check you, because we do get high on our own supply, and then all of a sudden we get a setback and we start questioning, oh my gosh, am I doing something wrong? I was going on such a high trajectory. I guess I'm not who I was. And then, like we said, you go down that slippery slope and start making more and more wrong choices because you started sipping your own Kool-Aid instead of being thankful that God has delivered you from a situation and continually growing in Him, versus taking that as affirmation that, oh wow, I got myself together. No, nobody in this world is together. The person you respect the most in the world doesn't have their life together. They figured out a way to manage. They figured out contentment. They figured out happiness. They figured out who their happiness resides in. But we're all battling our own battles beneath the surface. Everybody has their own struggles. Everybody is going through it. We like to make fun of rich people's kids because their problems aren't normal people problems, but their problems are
problems.
Yeah, their problems are real to them.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that's all that matters. We can help give them a realistic perspective, but saying that their problems are problems is devaluing, dehumanizing their personal experience. And honestly, it could turn them off to being blessings to other people. Because why would I want to help the poor if the poor are the people who are coming at me the most? To whom much is given, much is expected. But the thing is that if you're a jerk to me, I'm not going to want to help you out. And I think there's a lot more judgment passed than education, where it's like, you don't have a right to feel like that because you get to go home to $1 million mansion. I get that. I understand it. But at the same time, it's not helpful. This person's clearly stated that they're going through something, they have a problem, or they're feeling some type of way about it. Have conversations like this. The last thing that I want to leave this with before we sign off is be there for people, support people. There's a reason why I created a Facebook group called The Village. It'll be linked with this video, but it's because we all go through things. And I may not understand what you're going through, but it's still a valid experience. So any closing comments for you before we sign off on the first guest episode of Sinner to Saint?
What I would say is something to think about after watching something like this and after familiarizing yourself with just one story. Just one book, one story within the Bible, because it's I'm sorry, it's a big book. So
Yeah.
anyone walking into the faith, I would say trying to find the why in whatever you're going through right now, is having your situation or finding someone else that's really going through something and finding a possible tunnel, finding a why, finding the God in the situation. And also there's ways that we can give that we don't realize that if we received in that way, it's considered a blessing. If someone just giving $10 or saying, I hope that your day went well, sending a text, hey, I'm thinking about you, calling that person that you know was really going through it and they haven't really gotten a call in a minute, taking them out, something that we would appreciate given everything going on in our lives, and finding a way that God can act through us to someone else. I feel like it's something to think about while you're walking into, how do I walk into a faith that I really don't know about? You're really just finding God within yourself.
Yep.
So what I would just leave that as almost like a bit of homework. Just how are you able to see it, and how are you able to act through it as well?
Yes, and I greatly appreciate you quoting the very end of the first chapter of my book. I'm just playing with you. No, but I really appreciate your time. You've really been a blessing, and thank you for being the first, because I know that's always the toughest thing to do, because we got to figure out a lot of things, hone into processes and things like that. But, we learn together, we grow together, and I appreciate you taking this step with me. And to everybody that's watching, hope you have a blessed afternoon, blessed evening, blessed morning, whenever you're listening to this. We'll see you next time.